Hurricane Katrina occurred between the 23rd and the 31st of August in 2005 along the south parts of the USA, which is an MEDC. It's been regarded as one of the costliest natural disasters in the country and one of the 5 deadliest hurricanes in the US history. Now, tropical storms normally form at between 5 and 30 degrees latitude. Now, this is because the oceans around these areas then are very warm, and it gives these tropical storms then the energy that they need to form, as the seawater that is above 26 degrees Celsius. Now, because of this, then the water to evaporate quickly from the hot surface of the ocean. Now, this creates then an area of low pressure as that air is rising very quickly. What that does then is all that water vapor which is carried up into the atmosphere then cools down very quickly and forms into and condenses into large cumulonimbus clouds. Because there's such an area then of low pressure, this draws in large amounts of air which causes very strong winds. Now, due to the Coriolis effect which is in place, this causes then the hurricanes or cyclones or typhoons then to rotate, and what that does then is it moves them away from the equator up towards the poles. Looking at these maps here then, we can see the general trend that tends to happen then when we look at the movement of tropical storms. Looking at hurricanes in particular then, at the pattern that they take moving across the North Atlantic, we can see that they move westward and northward towards North America. And we can also compare this then with the location that was most affected by Hurricane Katrina itself, which is New Orleans in comparison. Now, New Orleans itself then is located in the south of the state of Louisiana, lying just to the north then of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, looking at the map here then that I've got in the top left hand corner, we can see that the actual path that Hurricane Katrina actually took. Now, the hurricane itself then, it moved westward, actually making landfall first in the south of Florida, where it measured at a Category 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It then re-entered the Gulf of Mexico, and with these warm waters then that are associated with the area, it actually gained more energy, which increased its severity to a Category 5, but then this dropped down then to a Category 3 by the time it had made landfall for the second time then off the coast of Louisiana on the 29th of August. The reason the storm was so devastating to the area of New Orleans is primarily down to its location and topography. Now, New Orleans is located in between Lake Pontchartrain and the Mississippi River. Now, what we can see from this cross-section is that the area of Greater New Orleans is actually below the level then of especially the Mississippi River. Now, as a result then, levees and flood walls have had to be built on either side of the city then to make sure that flooding was managed. Now, when the storm surge actually hit the area of New Orleans then, almost 50 of these levees actually failed and resulted in about 80% of New Orleans actually being flooded. Many now conclude then that the primary cause of this flooding was down to the poor design and construction by the Corps of Engineers. Some of these failures then included the overestimation of the soil strength underneath the levees that were built. Now, the engineers considered the soil to be stronger than it was, and when the storm surge actually hit then, it meant that the levees were much weaker than they had anticipated. Another factor which contributed then to the levee failure was due to negligent maintenance. Large amounts of destruction then were caused due to the strong winds which reached up to 175 miles per hour, and as a result also of the storm surge from the hurricane as well, which reached up to 20 feet. But the primary impacts then that resulted because of the hurricane itself was the large-scale flooding which came as a result of these levees breaking, causing flooding across 2/3 of the city itself. Other impacts then included that people were stranded in their homes and were unable to leave their homes. 1,800 people were killed because of the hurricane, and those survivors then did have to swim for their lives also, other than being stranded on their houses. Large amounts of infrastructure around the city were also severely damaged or destroyed, such as roads, houses, and bridges. In terms of the secondary impacts now then regarding the hurricane, we can see that overall the economic impact of the hurricane was estimated to be about $150 billion, making it the most expensive hurricane in US history. Other secondary impacts then that were caused by the hurricane was a loss of tourist industry, which had an effect on the trade in the area, and also looting became very prominent in the area. There was also a large amount of environmental impacts, such as oil spills, and the amount of flooding then which took place had an impact on the environments of the local wildlife within the area too. In terms of the responses then to the hurricane itself, due to the sophisticated monitoring systems that are in place then in the USA, because it's an MEDC, the government was able to predict the course of the hurricane and evacuate about 80% of the population of New Orleans, reducing the death toll considerably. For those that remained within the city but were homeless, they were provided with shelter in the local sports stadium. However, the living conditions were intolerable, and tensions broke out due to the poor living conditions and as a result of the aid that was provided, which resulted in a large scale amount of fighting which took place. Over $50 billion was provided in aid, but there were large amounts of criticism which took place as how the government actually dealt with the situation which took place in New Orleans. This was due to the lack of leadership which took place and the actual delayed response to the flooding. In terms of future adjustments now then to the area of New Orleans, there's now been an improved levee and flood wall system with 560 kilometres of levees and flood walls. Also, water is then being diverted away from the Mississippi River to rebuild wetlands.